Hello and welcome to the World Wanderlust podcast.
Oh, it's too early.
Take two. Hello and welcome to the World Wanderlust podcast.
I'm Ryan.
My name's Amanda and we're your hosts. We've got R2D2 here as a guest today.
The World Wanderlust podcast is not brought to you by Star Wars.
Just fans of Star Wars.
We did watch A New Hope last night. And how was that?
I think you need to be more specific about which one that is.
A New Hope. That's what it's called.
Okay, so it's the very first one from 1977.
Spoiler alert, Obi-Wan Kenobi dies.
Yeah, it was good. I don't know. Yeah, the acting is actually like not good.
Yeah, Luke is just a dweeb.
I think he gets better though, doesn't he?
Yeah, but
Harrison Ford though. Wow, he's just shockingly nice looking on the eyes.
Yeah, and everyone might be like, "Why haven't you seen the new Star Wars yet?" Well, we're getting to it, all right, people. Back off.
They don't even know what day it is. We're not telling you what day it is. It's not out yet.
A end of the year podcast.
Yeah, so this is our 2015 in review. And something that I've been thinking about quite a bit is what?
You've been thinking about?
Yeah, something that I've been thinking about recently in my life is how it's really easy for me to get caught up in the things that I haven't done or the places I haven't been or the things that I didn't do instead of thinking about, all the great things that did happen and the great things I did do. And so I think that this episode is a really cool opportunity to reflect on the last year and talk about all the things that we learned and the places that we did go.
So you feel like it's sometimes hard to maintain perspective?
Yeah, totally. I think being like the co-host of a travel podcast, and it's like, oh, I haven't taken a big backpacking trip in the last year. Like maybe I should get on that.
Yeah, that's something so we're coming up now. We left January 6th, 2014 to fly to Colombia. Mm-hmm. Then we spent 6 months in South America before returning back to Canada, moving to a new city and kind of having some other adventures. But yeah, we haven't been on like a big backpacking trip since then. So yeah, I definitely can relate to that feeling of it's kind of this like marker in time where you're like, wow, has it really almost been like a year and a half since we got back from our last like big trip?
Yeah, and I think it's easy to look at that and be like, oh, like what have we been doing? Like where'd the time go? Like why haven't we been traveling? But we have been traveling, just like different shorter trips.
And I've had the exact same thought without really making the connection that like, yeah, I moved to a new country.
Yeah, and like I'm traveling around in the US, which is like not as... I feel like it's just not as glamorous in my mind as if I was like, hey, Ryan, tuning in from India here. Or like, oh, I'm just going to go backpack Africa. Or like, I'm in Nicaragua. Like, I don't know. The U.S. is just like, okay, sweet. Like, I'm in Georgia, But it's like pretty cool. Like, I went to Nashville last weekend. Like, that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, like we've been seeing some, like, you went to Savannah, you went to Nashville, we got to the Georgia Guidestones.
Oh my God, like the best time ever.
A year ago.
Okay, so
a year ago, if someone had told you were going to go to the Georgia Guidestones, you would have been like, yeah, right.
I actually would have been like, sorry, what are the Georgia Guidestones? I think we're getting ahead of ourselves though. So instead of starting at like the fall of 2015, let's start back in January of 2015.
So January of 2015, we had been living in Canmore, Alberta, which is a small mountain town. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, maybe dig into the archives.
Small mountain town just outside of Banff National Park, Alberta.
So it was still like an adventure being there, but it had been long enough that it was kind of becoming normal.
Yeah.
We'd both been working at the same places for 5 months.
Yeah.
Hadn't been anywhere. And then at that point in time, I think we both kind of we're starting to feel like this itch to go somewhere new. Because we had originally only planned to stay in Canmore for a few months and then try to go teach English somewhere like China.
Yeah, we had like wanted to stay around for the summertime, and then we had hoped to go onwards. And it turns out that, the Bow Valley in the fall is really spectacular, and we were really enjoying ourselves. And so we just decided to stay longer. And, the beginning of 2015 came around, and we were still enjoying ourselves, or at least I know I personally was, and I was still really getting a lot out of my job and enjoying that. I know that we both were itching for more. And as we headed into 2015, I really was trying to shift my perspective on travel and sort of this idea that you have to go really far for a long period of time to get any value out of a trip. And in January, Lululemon, the company I worked for at the time, sent me to Vancouver for a weekend for a personal development training seminar. And it was one of these things where it was cool to go to Vancouver. It was the first time that a company had ever sent me on a work trip. It was like cool to have a food budget every day and to get everything paid for. But it was still kind of in my mind, like, okay, I'm going to Vancouver. Like, Vancouver is only a 1-hour flight from Calgary. I've got friends there. I've been there a ton. It's not really this exciting location for me to go to. It's kind of just Vancouver in my mind. And I sort of had to switch my perspective on it and just be like, okay, this is actually super cool that, this company that I work for decided to invest in me and pay for me to go somewhere. And I've got, like 4 days of personal development or 3 days of personal development training, and then 2 more days paid for in the city for me to explore and just be there.
Do you think that you were thinking that at the time?
Thinking what?
Well, so we were both, I remember towards the end of the year last year, starting to feel like, oh, I want to go do something cool. Do you think that like a weekend trip to Vancouver was kind of satisfying you in that way?
I think that like when I got back and thinking back on it, it's like, oh, that was a really cool opportunity. I think that at the time I was kind of like, okay, sweet, I'm going to Vancouver. Like, that's neat. But I was more excited for, the next trip I had planned, which was a trip to a yoga festival in Hawaii, which seemed way more exotic and cool and exciting to me. I think that's something that I can see now is that anytime you can get away is, it's getting away. It's cool. It's an experience. And I think it's shifting that perspective from having to go somewhere that's really far and really exotic to actually be like going on a trip in some form of like travel.
Yeah. I think I can definitely see what you're saying about it does depend on the perspective you bring to it. Mm-hmm. And like you might be someone who's traveling around constantly for work, but still feels this like urge to go on like a bigger trip. Mm-hmm. And then maybe if you really appreciate the fact that you do have all this experience going to new places, that's pretty cool. But there is also something about having a longer period of time and having the freedom with your time mm-hmm. that I feel like even we took a weekend trip to Savannah over Thanksgiving, and it's nice, but like there's still other things on their mind. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that I really enjoy about traveling over the long term is that you get this like real sense of being present. Like if you don't, obviously you don't have to, you can be on your phone, you can find distractions, but
yeah, you can go out and
having this like time
constantly.
And space that like kind of brings up these big life questions that you might have been avoiding if you had other things to think about.
Yeah, definitely. I can totally see that. And I think you make a really good point. I mean, a weekend away in Vancouver doesn't give me the same, I guess, like relaxation or adventure or combination of both as, my trip to Bali did. I think though it's like, I've really been trying to think about, like I said at the beginning, the things that I did do and the things that were really cool about 2015. And when I think about 2015, I mean, the thought of, going to Vancouver, is it really that cool? I mean, maybe not.
It depends on your context, right? Like if you're from the southern US and like you're going to Vancouver, that's like kind of cool.
Yeah.
But if you're from
Calgary,
it's like everyone has been there. So
yeah. And I think that's something that I'm just trying to like and being down in Georgia has been really cool for me because I've met a lot of people who are kind of from the area and they're like, wow, you're really like getting after it down here. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm visiting for like 6 months. Like I don't get to stay here forever. So I might never come back to Georgia again. Like I want to see as much as I can while I'm down here and see as many of the surrounding like cities and areas that I can. And I guess just when I think about my year, I think about the fact that, you know, going to Vancouver on a work trip was actually like a pretty cool experience for me. Mm-hmm. And it's something that I did do as opposed to something that I didn't get to do, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So kind of moving ahead in time. So something that like Ryan and I have obviously traveled quite a bit together. And if that's not obvious to you, then back up and listen to a few of our past episodes because we talk a lot about those travels. But something that we found was that we had traveled together for all of our trips, or we'd taken trips with friends or with family, and traveling alone or traveling solo is something that's really important. And so a goal for 2015 was we each wanted to take a trip by ourselves. And so Ryan's happened, he left the middle of February. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Do you want to talk a bit more about like the reasoning behind it though?
Yeah, sure.
So I think we both found travel to be like very beneficial for our own personal development, and kind of building self-esteem by going to these new countries that are kind of sketchy, and you haven't really been to very many sketchy places, but like places where you don't like feel comfortable all the time, and you have to go every day, kind of bring some challenges with it, like dealing with a new language, like even going out to get something you need becomes more of a challenge. You're kind of like more of a baby in some ways. Mm-hmm. And it was very beneficial for personal development for both of us. But I think we both kind of felt like there also would be good, maybe there's like some personal development stuff that we're missing out on because we do have each other to rely on. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. And like we've been dating since we were like 19, 20 years old. So, I mean, that's a pretty like young adult time. And your 20s are, from my experience, I mean, I'm still in my 20s, but I'm almost 27. So I've lived pretty much 7 years in my 20s, which is actually kind of scary to think that I'm that close to 30 and still like just doing what I'm doing. But anyways, yeah, I just like lost my breath. My heart just quickened a little bit there.
Why?
I think it's this idea that, I don't know, like if I think about when I was like 13 and I thought about being 30, I just like thought, you know, when you're 30, you have it all figured out. Like, you know what life's about.
So this is what you thought when you were
This is what I thought
younger.
when I was 13. And then it's kind of like, you know, I left my parents' house and I just like was being a young adult and kind of wild and crazy and doing my thing. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to graduate from university and I'm going to get a job and I'm going to figure this life thing out. And then I graduated and I did not figure this life thing out. And I still haven't figured it out. And I think what I've learned is that you don't really ever figure it out. You kind of you're just doing your thing. You're just figuring it out as you go, and you're learning and growing and constantly evolving, I think. And I think that's a really cool, beautiful thing.
Do you think, like, how do you think your mindset's changed over the past, like, 2 years?
Oh, that's like a massive question. I mean, we could do a whole podcast episode on that.
But like, give me the notes.
The Coles notes. I'm not good at that.
Notes? I don't know what they're called.
I don't know. I think both of those are note things. I think just realizing that adults don't have it figured out. Like, being an adult, quote unquote, is not having life figured out.
And there's not like some switch that gets hit, like boom.
Yeah. And there's also like no right or wrong. Like, because I am, you know, traveling in the southern US and working as an entrepreneur, and because I'm like have a business degree but I'm a yoga teacher, that's not wrong. Because I'm 27 and I don't have like a 6-figure.
Well, you're not 27.
Okay, I'm 27 in like 2 months, like less than 2 months. Because I'm 26 and 10 months old, doesn't mean that I have to have it all figured out. Like, I think it's really cool that I can just be. Anyways, I think my mindset has shifted a lot to understand that that's okay. Like, I think 2 years ago, I was kind of like, oh, I really don't want to be working this job that I'm doing. And I'm kind of freaking out because I don't know if it's okay to quit. And am I making like the worst mistake of my life? And what am I doing selling all my stuff? Am I having a quarter life crisis? Like, well, you know, just like mind racing, panic attack. Like, am I doing the wrong thing? And I can see now that, I don't know, like, is there a wrong thing? I mean, it's just life. It's your life. You're choosing how to live it.
Yeah. I definitely, I think we've mentioned it before, but like traveling for 6 months, the first time I came back with this feeling of like, okay, that was like an extended vacation. Like, that's never going to happen again. Mm-hmm. And then the second time, wasn't really thinking that much at the start of it. Like, spent 2 months without really even journaling or doing much thinking about life in general. But then it kind of became more of this trip that was about learning a language and like really thinking deeply about my life, what I wanted out of life, some things about my past that I felt like was learning that were holding me back. Mm-hmm. And then towards the end of that trip, I think the first trip kind of like introduced me to this feeling of like feeling alive and feeling like the enjoyment of having kind of more direction in my life. Mm-hmm. And then went back to just like working a job that I didn't really feel a lot of meaning, didn't feel a good sense of meaning in. And then coming to travel the second time, kind of getting reacquainted with this feeling of feeling alive and feeling effective, and then deciding like, oh, I don't want to go back into life outside of traveling and have it be like I want to continue living like this, and then thinking and realizing that like, oh, that is possible.
Yeah.
So then we kind of like set ourselves on applying that.
Yeah. And I think that that's a really cool thing to bring up, because I think that that was a lot of what, 2015 has been about for us. Like, this idea of, okay, so we've moved to this like new place, this mountain town that's a lot more relaxing. We both made the conscious choice to get jobs that weren't like career oriented. They were more about, having a job to make some money, something that's going to be enjoyable and fun, so that we've got time outside of work to work on these other things that really sort of make us tick, like the podcast or writing and that sort of thing. And I think that's pretty cool. What I was going to say, or where I was kind of going before I got all panicky about being 30 in 3 years and 2 months, is that something that, we talked a lot about was you do so much like personal growth and so much growing in general between the time that you're like 20 and 25. And we did so much of that with each other by our sides because we've been together for that long. And, for those people out there who have been in a long-term relationship through your 20s, like, there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's amazing to find a person that you can grow with. But I think it's also really important to realize who you are outside of that person and to find that independence outside of that person. And for you and I, because we spend so much time together, we decided to do that in the form of solo travel because travel had been so meaningful to both of us.
Yeah. And I think that like I think you were originally like, oh, I really want to go on a trip.
Yeah. I put it on my goals at Lululemon, and then you kind of were like, yeah, I want to do that too. And then you ended up doing yours before me.
Yeah. I think I was feeling the same thing, like wanting to get experience traveling by myself, and also just wanting to go. I was still enjoying living where we were living, but also just wanting to get kind of a break, go somewhere new, have some experience like by myself, kind of clear my head, mm-hmm. and have a lot of like time and space to think. And I think that's one of the awesome things about traveling, is not necessarily going anywhere in particular. Like, there's no like right place to go, but just leaving is also very beneficial.
Yeah, definitely. So when you think about your solo trip, like, what do you sort of reflect on with that?
So I think I remember going into it having a lot of trouble deciding on a place I wanted to go. Mm-hmm. I really wanted to go somewhere where I could practice learning the language. I wanted to go somewhere that was affordable. I kind of originally thought like, oh, hey, I should go to Prague. Like I've heard a couple cool things. We'll go there. And then as I started putting my mind to it, I was like, maybe I should go somewhere like Spain so I can practice Spanish. Maybe I should go somewhere hot. Maybe I should go Asia, like blah, 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 blah. All these other options kept coming up. And then eventually one day I was like, no, I should just go with what I originally wanted to do. Like I'm never going to find the right answer to this question.
Yeah. And it's, for those of you who are kind of like relating to this topic, we did a podcast episode way like back in time where Ryan really dug into that, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes for this episode so that you guys can get access to that episode. But it was a really interesting process, kind of like being by your side, but not planning with you for that. Because I remember like coming home so many days and you're like, I'm thinking I'm going to go to Spain now. And then the next day it's like, I might go to China. I don't think China was on there, but I might go to Asia. And I'm like, oh, cool. And you're like, okay, back to Prague. Like, okay, maybe Peru would be cool. But we were just there. Okay, maybe back to Prague. It was like this whole process. And then...
Yeah, I think so. I was trying to think about it like really analytically and like making pro con lists. And then one day I went to a yoga class and I was just like doing like shavasana at the end of it. And then like, I don't know, I was just like, oh, I'm being ridiculous. I should just go to the first place I wanted to go to.
Yeah, just go with your gut.
But thinking back on the trip, I think like the couple things that come to mind are just when we traveled in the past, I think we both had a bit of a tendency to lean on each other for our weaknesses. So for example, you did a lot of the planning because I tend to be a little bit less organized, not thinking ahead too much.
Yeah.
So being in a position where I actually had to like plan stuff was, I think, a really good learning opportunity for me. Like booking hostels and like deciding about hostels and deciding about where I wanted to go in general. Like I flew into Prague, had no plans other than 2 days at a hostel, and then kind of just planned out my route from there.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of interesting for me to be at home and getting like, you know, the occasional iMessage from you and emails, and we FaceTimed a little bit, but not a ton. And I remember at one point you were like, yeah, I'm going to do like XYZ. And then a couple of days later, you're like, hey, I'm here. And I was like, wait, that wasn't a part of the plan. And you're like, I changed it. Yeah. And like this organized, like planning analytical part of me at home is just like, oh God, this is stressing me out. Like, is he okay? And like you are. And I think and you were, and you always will be okay on your own. Like, I think that's something that traveling alone really teaches you, is that you are enough just on your own and you'll figure things out for yourself. Yeah.
I think that in general in life, something that has held me back is like fears of things that definitely aren't worth fearing. Like, I don't know, occasionally I'll see like a homeless person and be like, feel this anxiety about not having a set career, and like, what if I can't be an entrepreneur? What if I end up homeless? Like, what am I going to do with my life? And I think the same thing, like, that's sometimes the thing that keeps you in a fairly safe job, is this fear of not being all right if you didn't have that. And I think in a relationship, it's like the same dynamic. Like, maybe if you consciously think about it, you know you'll be all right, but you feel this like emotional pang and like fear at the thought of losing your relationship because you don't have this like sturdy sense of confidence in just handling life on your own. And I think that since we started dating when we were both quite young, I think that was kind of influencing my thinking some of the time, like a bit of worry about that.
Yeah, definitely. I can definitely relate to that.
So planning was a big thing. And then like weird transition, but whatever. And then also just socially, I think that when you're traveling with someone, like you have this social crutch. And I had previously thought of myself as an introverted person during university, and then to really be out by myself, going to hostels, I think that's like the perfect opportunity to really practice and build social skills, and to learn that, like, yeah, you get like this feeling of feeling like really lonely, and then you're like, oh, I really need to just like man up and go make some conversations with people. And like, yeah, it might be weird to start a conversation. I might feel awkward about it, but it feels like great when you do can find people you connect with, and that's like definitely worth any awkwardness at the start.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's really cool when I think like a fear for me about traveling on my own was like, like, how am I going to like have fun? Like, how am I going to do things by myself? Like, things aren't fun when you're alone. This was like this mindset that I had. And when you learn to enjoy your own company, it's this like really beautiful thing where you're like, I'm actually so awesome that I don't like really need other people right now. Like, I'm just really enjoying like just being myself, being with me, like doing my thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really cool thing. And I don't know if that'll resonate with everyone out there, but that's something that was a huge growth thing for me, because I was really terrified to be alone a couple of years ago. I just didn't really like being with myself. I didn't like being in like quiet spaces where it was just me. I liked to be surrounded by people. And I think when you come to a place when you're more confident with yourself and you're more confident with who you are and you're more comfortable with yourself, it's so much easier to just be there with yourself.
Yeah. And I know that's something you've kind of felt even coming down here to visit me.
What?
But like we talked about how when you went to yoga teacher training, you kind of had this context to build relationships. And like coming down here for kind of a few months, you don't have this context to like know people.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So that's another like interesting point. And I feel like we're kind of jumping all over the place, and I really wanted to keep this chronological, but I feel like this is also a good time to talk about this. Yeah, I know that's definitely a good point, I guess. So I was thinking about how, I did this 4,000 kilometer road trip from Alberta, Canada to Atlanta, Georgia. And it took me 36 hours, and I drove the entire thing by myself. A couple years ago, like the idea of that would have probably terrified me enough to not do it. I probably would have flown and figured out something else, because the idea of that would have probably scared me so much. And I actually loved it. I was like, I can pee when I want. I can stop and eat when I want. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to just like wander down this, like at this rest stop and check this out. Like there's nobody else to worry about. And I just found this like quiet contentment with like being on my own in the car.
So do you feel like your solo trip helped with that? Do you think you would have done it if you hadn't traveled by yourself earlier in the year? I
mean, it's hard to say whether or not I would have done it. Or I know a few years ago, I think it definitely would have been a different situation in terms of how that would have panned out. A year ago, do I think I would have driven it? Yeah, I think so. But I mean, I don't really know. You can't go back in time and figure out what you would have done. I mean, I'm pretty adventurous and I do love adventure. So I think I would have done it, but it maybe would have scared me more or been more uncomfortable for me. Like there wasn't really any part of me that doubted my ability to do that road trip by myself. When it was like, okay, like Ryan got his visa. He's going to Atlanta. Okay, sweet. I'm going to like move out of our house, finish up my job, and I'm going to come visit you down there. No questions asked. Like that's not something that scared me. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think maybe before doing my yoga teacher training and doing that trip by myself, maybe it would have scared me more, but I think I still would have done it.
So before you went to yoga teacher training and while I was away in Central Europe, you had gone to Hawaii to go to a yoga festival. Yeah.
So I went to a yoga festival called Wanderlust, and we also did a podcast episode on that. It was an amazing experience. If you're interested in yoga or meditation or dancing shows, anything cool like that, like Wanderlust is awesome. That was a like pretty interesting trip for me though. I booked it with two girls that I worked with at Lululemon, and one of the girls actually ended up backing out pretty last minute. So it's just me and one other girl who went down, and it's just interesting. Like we worked together. We had the occasional like coffee or yoga date outside of work. But we didn't really spend that much time together. Like, I mean, she's one of the closest friends that I left with from Lululemon. But at the time, we didn't really know each other that well. And we kind of just embarked on this like adventure to Hawaii together. And we stayed in a tent, like a 2-person tent for 4 nights together. And it was just this like really interesting growth opportunity. And I found out that, I think I already knew this, but maybe people didn't call me out on it. But I like talk when I'm feeling uncomfortable. I'm just like nattering on about nothing. And at one point she was like, "You talk a lot." And I was like, "Do I?" She's like, "Yeah, do you not like quiet time?" And I was like, "No, I love quiet time. Like I'm quiet a lot of the time. And I read a lot. Like I really like quiet activities." And she's like, "Okay, like it seems like you just seem to always be talking." And I was like, "Oh, am I bothering you?" And she's like, "A little bit. Like I kind of just want some like peace and quiet right now." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, like I can do that." And then I kind of thought about it and I just realized that it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of awkward to be quiet in a closed space with somebody that you're not comfortable with, I think is what I learned out of that. And my way of compensation.
Do you think it's like thinking that you need, is it like thinking too much about that other person?
Totally. Yeah. I was like, what's Nicole thinking? What does Nicole like want me to do right now? Like, is she upset? Like, what's going on with her? And instead of just being like, "Hey, you're like kind of quiet this morning. Like, is everything okay with you?" I would just like fill the space where she wasn't talking with words. And it's cool. Like we both worked for Lululemon, and Lululemon's a super like open, honest culture. So we like had that conversation, and lots of people might think that's weird. It just wasn't weird for us.
Yeah. It's kind of dumb actually when you think about how often people like meta talk. So like they'll ask one question, but the answer they want is completely different. So like, yeah, it's like quiet between you and a friend or someone, you and a coworker. And instead of being like, "Oh, are you like good?" Like I'm perceiving something like, "It seems like you're down this morning." People will like ask different questions like, "Oh, how about the weather today?"
Yeah, that's like exactly what I was doing. And like, I was just confusing her. Like, she's like, "What? I don't want to talk about this right now. Like, I just want to, walk to yoga in silence. Like it's like 7 a.m. and I'm tired." Yeah. And once we had that conversation, I was like, okay, cool. I don't need to worry about her when she's not talking. And like, I don't need to like fill the space with words. And then we had, just a really great trip after that. But it was like this huge learning experience for me. And it was kind of the first time that I traveled with somebody that I just didn't really know that well. And I mean, it worked out. Like, I don't feel any weirdness about her bringing that up. Like, it was just, I'm glad she did. I would way rather somebody talk to me about something that's bothering them than just like let it sort of simmer, and like maybe resent me that they've paid all this money and didn't have that enjoyable time with me. But yeah, it was definitely an interesting learning experience for me, for sure.
And then, so you got back, I was away, I got back. We had like 3 weeks together in March.
Yeah.
And then you took off for Bali to do yoga teacher training. Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. I mean, I've been practicing yoga since I started university, basically. So like 2000, I think it was like 2008. So after like second semester into first year. And I was kind of like an off and on yoga practitioner. And then in 2012, I bought like this unlimited pass, and me and a girlfriend were going pretty much every day. And I was like, I love this. Like, I think that I want to teach this. And she was like, "Yeah, do you think you will like get your teacher training?" I was like, "Yeah, at some point. I'm like in this career job right now and I want to travel next. So like maybe down the road." And then started working at Lululemon and was like, "Yeah, I think it's still like down the road for me. I think I want to be better at yoga." And then I don't even know what switched in my head. All I know is that we were at work and one of the girls was like, "Let's do like a 6-month goal challenge." Like she's like, "I want to do a pull up." And another girl's like, "I want to learn to make homemade pasta." And I was like, "I want to complete my yoga teacher training." And she was like, "What? Like in 6 months, you want to be a yoga teacher?" And I was like, "Yeah, 6 months. I want to be a yoga teacher. Like I want to do this now." And it just kind of, I got a month off work. Within like 2 months from that, I picked a place and booked it. And then I just went. It was like this pretty cool experience. And it's crazy to think about that like a year ago. So like last December was when I kind of was like, okay, I'm going to like do this thing. I'm like going to become a yoga teacher this year.
So, if anyone wants to find out more about like your feelings going in and your trip and stuff afterwards, like they can check out those episodes.
Yeah, definitely. There's pre-trip and post-trip as well, which is pretty cool.
But looking back on it now, it's interesting because you had some experience. You came back after a while, started doing teaching experience, and now you're kind of able to, or just trying to put together something where you can work on combining yoga and previous educational experience in business and like creating something new.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like kind of at this cool place where I'm like, a year ago, I had no idea that this is where I would be. Like a year ago, I didn't really even know I'd be a yoga teacher at this time. So that's a really cool thing. And that just shows like, life just happens and you can plan for things and you can prepare for things, but you're changing every single day and things change constantly. And that's a really, really cool thing. And yeah, it was like one of the best experiences of my life. I mean, even if somebody is not super passionate about yoga, or maybe they like yoga, but they don't want to teach, I think a teacher training is still so beneficial. Like I honestly learned more about myself in my yoga teacher training than I learned about yoga.
Yeah. And I think that just having it as like a context for a trip is cool.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's like, it was such a cool way to go out and take a trip because I did all the travel on my own and I planned it on my own. And then I arrived there and I had this group of people that surrounded me and supported me for 30 days, which was really, really neat to have. But something that, going back to sort of what you learned with travel and how we kind of depended on each other traveling is you have always been my person who gets me from point A to point B. Like I've got this really bad sense of direction that I kind of allow other people to, flex their strong muscles in terms of direction. And I kind of just like flounder around behind them and follow them. And it was like this experience where, after my teacher training, I went to a different place for 4 days and I got dropped off this taxi by myself. And I'm, in this city and I leave my hostel and I'm like, okay, like all of a sudden, like finding these points of reference to where my hostel is. And I'm like, okay, it's on this street, on this road. And this is like what's across from it, because I don't have anybody by my side to help me get back home. Like I was like, I got to do this myself. And I don't know, it's like, was kind of nerve wracking, but it's one of those things again, like I was totally fine. Like my sense of direction is only as bad as I perceive it to be. Like I can get myself around when I make the effort. Yeah.
And it's like, if you occasionally you find people in your life who fill holes for you, or like where like you
constantly find people to fill holes for you.
Like for you, when we were first starting to date, like when we would go to social situations, I was a bit more introverted. You were a bit more open in social situations. So I could kind of like hide back and you would start and then I could like move in. And I think that can be fine, but it also doesn't really allow you to practice. So like when you get the opportunity, like if I'm always directing us around a city and you don't get the opportunity to practice, you never actually get better at it.
Yeah. And like, so I've written about this sort of concept before, and I guess the metaphor, the analogy that I've used is it's like if you're right-handed and you're stronger with your right hand and all you ever do is do like shoulder, no, what's the dumbbell?
Curls.
Yeah, and like bicep curls. Oh my God. I actually do work out. It's like if you only ever do bicep curls with your right arm and you're just like constantly flexing that muscle and constantly strengthening that muscle. And you're like, screw you, left arm. Like you're useless. I'm just not going to use you. Like I'll just rely on my right arm over here and somebody else will like, some left-handed person can help me out with this. And when you put it like that and you think about it, it sounds so, so awkward because we would never allow ourselves to physically look uneven or unbalanced. But in so many ways, our skills and our mental capacity, we allow that to be like super unbalanced, and we don't strengthen these things that we're weak at in terms of intelligence or skills.
Yeah. I think that there's something to to be said for like really focusing on developing your strengths. But yeah, I think that learning how to be confident in your ability to survive, so that like really working on those weaknesses is important. And I feel like it seems obvious, right? Like people know that they are able to survive, but I think that there is like quite a bit of fear. I think I had that where fear of like going to new social situations, or maybe you had fear of like getting around with directions. Mm-hmm. Like, can I really like manage my life, or do I need people to remind me to do stuff all the time?
Yeah. And like, I mean, I think it's still cool to have people that can keep you accountable. Like I have a coach that I work with weekly who helps me with like the career side of my life and sometimes gets me through some like personal things. And I think he's great. Like it's not like you have to do everything without the support and help of other people, but knowing that you're an independent, strong person on your own and you don't really like need other people to fall back on.
Yeah. So that the people in your life are there because they're like, you want them to be there. Mm-hmm. You don't need them to be there. You know that you're perfectly fine. All right. So you know that you can treat your relationships like voluntary relationships, mm-hmm. where you can say, oh, this relationship's really positive. And when it becomes not positive, it's like, okay, that's fine. You don't have to take it as like, oh, I need this relationship, so I've got to accept whatever comes the other way.
Yeah, definitely. So the next, you and I kind of stayed put, I guess, I got back the middle of May, and then I was home for like 2 weeks, and then you went on a weekend adventure to Grand Rapids, Michigan for a personal development training seminar thing.
So I'd never been to the Eastern United States before, and I went to a Foundation for Economic Education seminar on communicating liberty. And that did really have like a big impact on the direction of my life, because now I'm in Atlanta working at the Foundation for Economic Education. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like, I mean, for listeners who haven't followed our entire journey, prior to Ryan going down to the FEE seminar in Grand Rapids, we had planned to end our lease. Like our lease was up October 1st, and we planned to go down to...
It was August 1st.
No, we'd already extended it by that point.
Yeah. But.
Okay, our lease was originally up August 1st. We decided to extend it till October 1st. Fall, where we were living, is really spectacular, and we decided to stay a little bit longer. And so we had our lease till October 1st. We were planning to go down to Central America, hang out.
Podcast.
I wanted to podcast. I wanted to teach some yoga, that sort of thing. And then Ryan came back from the seminar and just was like inspired by what FEE had to offer, and was looking for just like kind of, what were you doing? Like browsing for opportunities type thing?
Yeah. I was just like, oh, that was really cool. At that point I was really focused on being an entrepreneur, but I kind of discovered this program called Praxis, where it's kind of an education mixed with a job opportunity. So you get some work skills, you get to really like center your education on the things you want to learn, and it's kind of geared towards giving you entrepreneurial skills. It's kind of like supported self-education in a way. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was an opportunity to go have an experience at this organization that really aligns with my values, and to try out what worked. Because before my job between traveling the first 2 times was, I didn't find it particularly meaningful. And so this was an opportunity to do work that had like a very clear sense of meaning.
Yeah, and something that's like you're passionate and interested in. Yeah. Passionate about and interested in.
And still being able to develop the skills I want. So like working on the podcast, writing.
Yeah, totally. And so you applied for that, and we were sort of in limbo from the time that you decided to apply for that at the end of June until September, when you actually got your visa approved to come down to Atlanta.
Yeah. So I think we talked about it on the Moving to Atlanta podcast.
Oh yeah. I think we've talked about.
Yeah. I didn't know for sure until I was actually like at the airport. There's still this like doubt about like, oh, is this actually visa going to actually happen? Because you apply for it right at the border. And I was fairly confident, but when you don't know for sure, there's always this like lingering, it's a possibility that it might not go. So it's a very weird position to be in.
Yeah. And I think it was like a little bit of a turbulent time. And I know at least in my life for sure, and I'm certain in yours as well, kind of like through August, especially just having this like uncertainty about what was going on was becoming really like confusing for me. And I was like, I'd get really attached to like, oh, I really want to teach yoga in Nicaragua. And then I'd be like, oh, but like traveling like the southern US would be so cool. Like all these cool places I could go to. Well, hanging out with Ryan as well. And yeah, it's like I just flip-flop so much, and I was trying not to get attached to either idea. But at some point you just, as much as you try to be neutral about something, your mind has an opinion. You have something you want, and it was an interesting experience. Like I feel like I'm better off for that experience, but it was a bit stressful at times.
Yeah, but it was really cool, like to have the experience of really knowing that things are out of control and just trying to like accept that. Mm-hmm. And then
it was a good practice for me. Like I like to control almost every element of my life. I know I talked about this with Rory last week, but like something that travel's really helped me with is even like, having these emotional attachments to things like food. Like I would look at menus at restaurants and get attached to this thing that I was going to eat and then feel really sad if that didn't work out. Mm-hmm. And travel really, really has helped me to let go of control, because things almost never work out the way that you think that they're going to when you're traveling. Like there's so many other elements that play into it. And that was a huge thing with the Georgia versus Central America thing, is just relinquishing control, because I had no control. Just being like, yeah, whatever happens is going to happen, and it's going to be sweet either way.
Yeah.
And going to make the best out of it regardless.
Yeah. And then, so obviously it did work out. I got here in September. You stayed a month.
Yeah.
And it's interesting for me to think about, like, looking back on this year, how this year is like one of the years we spent like the most time apart. Like we spent 3 months apart out of the year. Mm-hmm. 3 different periods of time for months where I was gone, you were gone, I was gone.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I feel like this is probably like the strongest point we've had in our relationship.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting concept. I think it just really shows that when you're an independent person outside of your relationship, then you're not depending as much on the other person. And that can really strengthen your relationship, because you can, I don't know, I'm trying to like, it's hard to,
or just like improved confidence as 2 individuals makes for a better unit.
Yeah. And I guess it's not this like depending on the other person, and you can kind of just be in the relationship without relying on that person to sort of hold you up. Mm-hmm. I guess, if that makes sense. Something that I wanted to touch on regarding my year quickly was, I guess maybe not quickly, maybe longly. I guess it doesn't really matter.
We'll be podcasting for 6 hours.
Yeah. Get settled in, go take a bath, friends, just plug us in.
Don't go to work today.
Yeah, just don't go to work. We're going to talk all day. A cool like little adventure that I had is that I went down to Glacier National Park in Montana, and I met up with a friend from a yoga teacher training who lives down in Bozeman. And the reason why I want to mention that, I did a podcast episode on that, just like a quick little 15-minute one, kind of talking about, our experiences down in Glacier National Park. But had somebody told me like a year ago that I would have a really, really good friend who I love dearly in Bozeman, Montana, I would have been like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, I don't know anybody in Bozeman, Montana. And it's just this really cool thing that can happen from traveling. Like, you never know who you're going to meet and who you're going to connect with.
Yeah. And I think that really applies not just to traveling, but thinking about how the direction of your life is going to go. I think one of the big things, stick with me, I'm not trying to steal your point, but okay. Like from thinking about it as like maybe a 23-year-old, and like this messaging I've got my whole life is like, I have to find my direction in life. Like I have to know the direction that I'm going for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. But you really just have to pick a direction you want to go, like right now.
Oh yeah.
So like the things that follow afterwards, you never know. Like, you make this decision to go to yoga teacher training. You happen to like bond with this one person that results in like a trip to Montana that you wouldn't have taken, that results in like someone we meet in Banff to do a podcast episode with.
Totally.
And
yeah.
it has an impact on your drive down here. And like, so once you start, like, you don't have to pick these like landmarks that are like so far ahead of your life. You just got to like pick little short landmarks, and then you just kind of go from like A to B to E to F to Z to wherever.
Yeah, totally. I think that that's a really great point. And I think that I talked about this sort of in one of probably the episode coming home from Bali, because I obviously didn't know Chelsea before I left, but I expected to meet like cool people at a yoga teacher training. I expected to connect with people. I didn't expect to meet somebody who I was like we refer to each other as like I'm 3 years older than her. So like, she's like my little sister that I never had. And I'm like the big sister she never had. And we really just do have this special relationship. And it's funny, like crossing the border to come down to Atlanta on my road trip. Like I stopped in Bozeman and stayed with her for a few nights, and the border agents asked me her birthday, and I was like, I don't know, it's sometime in April. Like it was a couple days before we met. And it's funny because I haven't even known her for a year yet. She's like this person that I'm so close with, and we talk on the phone, you know, once a week or every couple weeks, and have these like really great conversations. And you just never know when these people are going to come into your life that you're just going to be like, yup, like you are my person. Like you just don't know. And it's really cool when it blindsides you. And I think, yeah, you make like such a great point about like a year ago, I had no idea that I was going to go to Bali to go to a yoga teacher training. And then I did that, and I made like a best friend. And then from there, I took a trip to Glacier National Park, and we met a really cool guy who was on his bike and had been on his bike from Patagonia. And we met up in Banff 2 weeks later. And then Ryan and I recorded a podcast episode with him, which we'll put on the show notes because he's like super interesting. And yeah, then I had like this place to crash on my road trip down, which was really cool. So yeah, you just never know.
Yeah. And I feel like it's kind of the same thing where we got home from traveling. I started kind of like applying myself to learn more about these things that I was interested in. Through that, kind of found out eventually, kind of randomly, about FEE. FEE. Well, like people aren't going to know if I just say FEE, but. And then go to that seminar, have an awesome time, find out about this like praxis thing, end up like being in Atlanta, meeting lots of cool people. Like 1 year ago today, if you asked me like, what are the odds of you living in Atlanta 1 year from now? I would have been like 0. Like there's absolutely no chance I'd be, well, I mean, I guess I could have been like, I guess it's like, there's no reason
why you would have gone to Atlanta.
No foresight, any reason at all, but yet like here I am. And I think the same thing will probably, like if I'm trying to be like really open to change and really open to like
opportunity
and adventure and like just enjoying life. So 1 year from now, where will we be? I have no idea.
Wherever the force takes us.
But yeah, it's just cool how like when you start, it's weird. You stop trying to have this like fixed life course, and you start doing what you want to do. That's when you start doing what you want to do, you end up in places you would never expect yourself to end up.
Yeah, which is super cool.
Strange.
Yeah, it's strange, but it's cool. I feel like it's kind of, I don't know, I feel like my mindset shift, which you were kind of asking me about before, has really just been to like be open to those things. Like a couple years ago, I was really wanting to be in control of my life. And I really wanted to control, you know, I wanted to plan things and I wanted to control things. And now I'm just like, okay, cool. Like, I feel like adventure happens when you stop trying to plan adventure, and you meet really cool people when you stop trying to meet really cool people. And, you know, these things just happen when you kind of just let them happen and you let go of the control over your life.
Mm-hmm.
That's like at least what I've learned in the last year. But to kind of go back forward. So I went to Glacier National Park and we're just all over the way.
I feel like we hopped.
All over the way, all over the place. I've had too much talking today. But that's amazing. I love to talk, obviously. No. Okay. Sorry. Recollecting my thoughts. August, went to Glacier National Park, really uncertain, sort of turbulent period in our lives because we had no idea what was happening. And then September comes around, Ryan goes down to Atlanta, and I had this like really great month at home. Like I finally knew what was happening, and I just really, really took advantage of my last month living in Canmore. Like I hiked a ton. I spent a ton of time outside. I hung out with like friends every single day. I did just like so much yoga with all the teachers that I loved. And it was this mindset of like, okay, I'm only here for one more month. Like I really want to take advantage of it. And then moved out of our place, stayed with a friend for a couple days, and then embarked on a 4,038 kilometer road trip by myself, which I actually recorded parts of it. So that's a pretty interesting podcast episode. If you want to get to know me on like a whole different level, listen to that episode because it is like unedited and it's authentic and you might like me less after, and that's fun. But that was a cool growth opportunity for me. Like, I don't think I ever thought I'd do that massive of a road trip by myself.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting how much your perspective on something changes when you know you're leaving.
Yeah.
Like, especially like place-wise, like you can really appreciate the place you're living at more when you know you're about to leave.
Yeah. I was like, oh shit, I'm going to like this 6 million person city, concrete jungle. Like I need to just be one with the trees for like every single day while I'm here. And also too, it was like this finality of my job. I was like, okay, I'm going to like fold the shit out of stretchy pants for the next month because I'm probably going to miss this when I leave. And I did for the first few weeks that I was down in Atlanta. I really missed my life back home. But I think that that's another cool growth opportunity in life, is to move around and experience change. And being in the southern U.S. has also been really neat. I've had the chance to see Savannah, Georgia Guidestones. We went to Charleston. Where else have we been? I went up to Nashville a couple weekends ago. I feel like we've been to more places. Is that all we've been?
Yeah, Athens,
Georgia. You've been down to Noonan, Georgia.
Soon to be Texas.
Yeah, heading off to Texas for Christmas, which is pretty neat.
Mm-hmm. So that pretty much concludes our year in review.
Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to add about 2015?
Absolutely not.
If you could sum up your learnings from 2015 in one word, what would that word be?
Purple. One thing that kept coming into my mind, and I feel like it's kind of a little bit like douchey, but when I was in...
Don't put a judgment on it.
So there's this like...
It's not douchey until you give people the idea that it might be douchey.
Okay, well, like you might think this is douchey. But when I was in the Czech Republic, I was talking to my Czech teacher about kind of my life course and how I'd gone from like... I'd kind of quit my job to go on this trip. When I got back, I was going to try to like teach English and like be an entrepreneur. And I just told her how about like our life in general. We had been in South America, I moved to a new city, started a new job, blah, blah, blah. And she told me about this like kind of saying they have in Czech, which is changes life in Czech.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, like Semene je život or something. Semene je život. I don't know, my Czech's kind of not great. But anyways, well, it's absolutely atrocious, actually. It's non-existent. Not great. It's giving myself way too much credit. Anyways, that like expression really like stuck with me. And yeah, it's something that I think really like applied to how I was finding myself feeling alive in the past, and something that I was kind of inspiring to do in the future, like not being worried about change. And even if it means leaving something good, but just, still making sure things are changing.
Yeah. I like that.
Because that's what being alive is all about.
Yeah.
How about you?
My one word?
Well,
I think my word would be flow. Are you thinking something dirty?
No.
Okay. I think so. I was thinking about that. I was like, it kind of sounds like menstruation.
Yeah, let's paint this picture.
So the reason why I'm going to choose flow anyways, though, is this idea of like change. And it's kind of when you think about like water runs, it flows from one place to another. But it's also like go with the flow. And I think it's been a major theme I think that I've talked about through all my experiences. It's just like letting go of control and just, whatever happens. And I feel like if you can just like go with the flow of your life, then you can really be alive and you can live a much happier life.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that comes to mind for me as well is going from...
You only get one word.
Okay, well,
I'm just kidding.
This isn't another word. This is just a point. But a year ago till now, like a year ago, we were kind of like 4 months into podcasting, September, October, November, December. Yeah. And now we've been doing it for like almost a year and a half. And as we've gone on, more and more people have started listening. And over the past few months, like we've really started to interact with some of you guys who have listened to the podcast. And it just like, it's so awesome to get people like saying that they really like relate to what we're saying, or that we've had like some sort of like positive impact, or like, something we've said they've been able to relate to. And like, that's just so cool. And it's like a weird feeling,
Oh yeah, totally. I think that, we started the podcast as something that we're like, this will be like a cool adventure. Like this will be a fun thing to do in our free time. And just like kind of, we really transitioned and grew with the podcast as becoming, talking behind the microphones just became this more comfortable thing, and not worrying so much about like, oh, I just stumbled over my words. I just said something really stupid. Like somebody's going to hear that, to just like being Ryan and Amanda. And it's cool when you kind of put yourself out there, when somebody turns around and says, I heard what you were saying and I get it. And it spoke to me. And that's a really cool thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's so many people in my life who I hear what they're saying and I'm like, yeah, you just like made a huge difference for me. And to be somebody who's doing that for somebody else is really cool. And it's something that I actually really love about teaching yoga too, is after a class when somebody's like, yeah, like when you said like have compassion for yourself in balance poses, because your balance might suck today. And they're like, and mine did. And I needed that. I'm like, cool, this is why I like doing this. Mm-hmm. Because the words I just said to you spoke to you and made a difference in your life.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in saying that, we really do love to hear from the listeners out there. So reach out to us. If you've got a really cool story from 2015, we would love to hear it. So contact us, www.theworldwanders.com. Reach out on Facebook at The World Wanders. And check out our Patreon page. And if you want to support our creative endeavors, we would love that. And thanks for listening. You guys make this happen. So
yeah, I hope you had an awesome 2015 and an even better 2016.
Yeah. Happy New Year.
I hope you are going to have a better 2016.
Yes.